the home of inspiration every day.
Most people give up on themselves easily. You know the human spirit is powerful.
From news,
Countries across the globe have been hit by the COVID-19 virus.
views,
There's a global trend to see an increase in GBV incidences, specifically domestic violence.
sports,
What's he say? It's a really good ball. It's Shabalala.
and music to inspire you every day. This is Vuka Online, your inspiration radio station.
Hi there, and welcome to Healthcare Hour with Colleen Qvist. Another
Good
week,
morning.
and we will say hello. Oh, I've got a very eager guest today. His name is Louis Buckle, and he would like to be part of the introduction. So, hello, Louis.
Hi, Colleen. How are you?
Well, thank you. Welcome.
Thank you very much.
So, Louis, why we have Healthcare Hour with Colleen Qvist is all about healthcare professionals. It's for us to understand that they are real. They get tired, they get hungry, they would like to see their families that they probably never see. It's also for us to improve the relationship between the healthcare professional and the patient. And also, as patients, as you know, at some point we are just public and then we get to be patients without us even knowing about it. And it's important there as well that we are informed, that we have informed, we make informed decisions. Yes, listen to me here, tripping over my words today. All right, so Louis, after the break, we're going to hear all about you, but let me just tell the listeners that Louis has got work experience in insurance, medical scheme, and medical industries in South Africa, Rwanda, Tanzania, Kenya, and Ghana. So lots of experience coming to talk to us today. But we'll go for that break. And then when we come back, we're going to hear all about you. But let's go for the break.
The home of inspiration every day.
Most people give up on themselves easily. You know the human spirit is powerful.
From news,
Countries across the globe have been hit by the COVID-19 virus.
views,
There's a global trend to see an increase in GBV incidences, specifically domestic violence.
sports,
What's he say? It's a really good ball. It's Shabalala.
and music to inspire you every day. This is Vuka Online, your inspiration radio station.
Welcome back. You are listening to Healthcare Hour with Colleen Qvist. My guest today is Louis Buckle. He is joining us from Cape Town, and he's telling us the sun's shining today, so that's good. But Louis, welcome again. Thank you for coming to talk to us.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for the invite, Colleen.
All right. So as I said, you have got work experience in insurance, medical scheme, and medical industries in South Africa, Rwanda, Tanzania, Kenya, and Ghana. And you went off and did a business science degree at UCT, and you graduated a few years back. Okay. So let's hear about you. Who is Louis?
Okay, I started my career in insurance with the great Sanlam & Belleville, and then moved very quickly into the medical scheme, at the time SanMed. From there, I went to Cape Medical Plan, which at that stage was one of the biggest medical schemes in the country. We don't remember that far back. They're still around, they're a niche market. I'm not with them, haven't been for a while. Then I went to work for a combination of Hanover Re and Netcare. And between them, we set up medical insurance and evacuations companies throughout Africa. Then I got involved with one of the big pathology groups, which was very interesting to see things from the other side of the equation, because we only hear it from the patient side sometimes, we hear it from the medical scheme side, and it was nice to see what the doctors see on their side. And yeah, so basically 35 years experience in the industry, and I still enjoy it. And then COVID arrived, and we were stuck on the hill somewhere. And then one of my neighbors landed in hospital with a very nice outstanding account of about R500,000. And then one of my neighbors, same position as me, didn't have much better to do, so we assisted the lady and we managed to get the scheme to literally pay every single cent that was outstanding. And what was interesting about it is then word of mouth went around and we realized there's a lot of people in the same position. And often it's, as a patient, I think if you're a sickly person and you're older, you tend to know about medicine and the doctors. But if there's nothing wrong with you and something happens, it's actually a huge trauma event. You haven't got a clue where to go to. How's the patient? Do you know it's a good doctor? I wouldn't have a clue. So then you land in the system and you get sucked in. The doctors run around, try and sort you out. And then at the end of the day, they don't get paid. They send a member an invoice, which the member often cannot pay. And yet the medical scheme may or may not be correct in not paying it. So it's a bit of a balance. So with my experience, I've actually seen that. There's no such thing as one truth. I think there are three truths in this matter. It's the scheme's truth, the doctor's truth, and the patient truth. And infrequently, they happen to be the same. And I think from this, we got approached by a couple of doctors, whose clearly patients talk, and they go, "I know we also have a patient that we think should be paid." And then they refer the patient to us, and then we deal with the doctor. And out of this, sort of a pattern is developed, and we've identified where there are little shortcomings. And we tend to have we're not aggressive. That's our main thing. We have a good relationship with the schemes because we want the scheme to pay. We have a good relationship with the doctor because we don't want the relationship between the doctor and the patient to be disrupted too much. And that's basically who we are. And this little business started off, and thanks to COVID, the Council for Medical Schemes will now do things via Microsoft Teams. And you don't have to fly to Pretoria to have a meeting with them,
Yes.
which was a
Yes.
huge cost to the patient before. And
Yeah.
that's basically where we are. So we run the whole business is actually run online. Our people are all over the country. One of our top staff members lives in the metropolis of Carlitsdorp. And it's worked for us. So yeah, that's who we are.
Okay, so have internet will work.
Have internet will work, absolutely.
Yes. Okay, so what I'm hearing you say is that you aren't gunning for anybody, you aren't on a witch hunt, you aren't after medical schemes, you aren't after insurance claims, you aren't ganging up against doctors or patients. You're trying to see what is the common story, the thread between all of them, so that all their truths align.
Yeah, that's the long and short. We'd like the doctor to get paid almost what he thinks he should get paid. The patients to pay what they can, and the scheme and insurer to pay what they ought to be paying.
Yes.
And that's our actual goal. And there's a couple of bits of friction every now and again, which you can see on our Facebook page, because they're unfortunately, and I always say to people, the downside of what we do, it always seems like we see the worst of the industry because that's where they land with us. And then you have this misconception that they're all like it, and they're not. There are some fantastic people out there. But yeah, so that's
but I also see what happens though is that you put in a claim, or your healthcare professional puts in a claim, and then it comes back as no, we're not going to pay, or we'll pay 5 cents. So I mean, I think about even my own life where, my medical aid said, no, we're not paying for your glasses or whatever. And I thought, pick up the phone, talk to them. And yes, they ended up paying my glasses. Or I went to a healthcare professional once where the invoice was so little, you couldn't actually see it. So by the time you scanned it, and even after it was emailed, my medical aid said, no, we're not paying it. We can't see it. And there the healthcare professional said, well, they're not changing it. That's the way it is.
Yeah, I mean, those are very real events.
Yeah. So
and it's
these
also
things do happen. Yeah. So where do you come in? How would you help the patient or the doctor?
there's an example that you've just used of your spectacles, actually a very interesting one. We basically start, the patient contacts and says they normally wait too long. That's the first thing. So once they're being told the doctor is demanding X, he's sitting on 120 days, and then they'll respond. And then we go, first approach we have is we ask for a copy of the invoice, and remarkably, sometimes they don't have it. Patients receive a heck of a lot of SMSs and letters from debt collectors, but there is actually no invoice attached.
Yes.
They go, you owe us 500 Rand, but we can't tell you what it's for. So that's our first step. We get an invoice from the doctor involved. Then we often have a response that we can't give it to you in terms of the POPI legislation, and then we go, actually, POPI doesn't quite work like that. And if you want your money, we think you should give us the invoice, and here's all the documentation. And then they give you the invoice. So a lot of the time we find there's a coding error, the plain, simple coding error. If we identify the coding error, we simply send an email to the medical scheme and say, represent this patient, this is a problem, can you fix it? And interestingly enough, the big schemes out there are particularly good at fixing this kind of thing. So people often will have this thing like a Discovery or a Metropolitan or a FedEx don't respond. They do respond if you have the details correct, and they respond very quickly. So when the details are not correct, that we have huge arguments, because you've got to align what the doctor wants with what the scheme thinks they qualify for payment. You mentioned an interesting example about savings accounts. So we run a little thing. We've got a little bit of a pet hate in the industry, and it's called a medical savings account. Because unless you're a very astute person, you cannot actually keep track of your account. So we find the best scheme, I'm going to mention them, out there that we've experienced is BestMed regarding savings accounts, because they actually tell you on their statement when they receive a claim where the procedure code indicates to PMB. And then they ask for additional information. We are not aware of any other scheme that does that. All of the others will simply pay it out of your medical savings account. And if you pick it up, they will then refund you when you complain. Our attitude on that is we believe it's not ethical because the average patient has no clue what it is. And yet they've received the claim. The other thing we have against medical savings account is if you weren't on a medical savings account, the scheme wouldn't have paid the doctor. Then the doctor would send you an invoice, and then you at least know it hasn't been paid, and then you can query it. So that's our main gripe. So we always say to patients, why give your money to the medical scheme in a savings account if you can put it in the bank and get some decent interest on it? And the second one we have is emergency units, hugely traumatic. So people go to emergency unit. Most people don't realize that the ER unit at the hospital is not part of the hospital. And the problem we have there, so if you go to a Netcare ER unit, and they're all like that, it's not specifically Netcare, the patient assumes because he's got Netcare as his designated service provider that the ER unit's going to get paid. And herein lies the problem. The ER unit is not necessarily on the DSP list for his medical scheme. And if it's an emergency, it doesn't matter. But very few things, and I'm a little bit on the doctor's side, very few things that land at the ER unit are in fact medical emergencies. And it drives the poor doctors nuts because they've got to deal with random little things and they're not going to get paid for it. And that's, I think, the big thing. So if you go to an ER unit, you need to make sure in your area that that ER unit is actually on your medical scheme's DSP list. And we deal a lot with that. Then the next one
Okay,
we
I
deal
think
with
on that point, let's go for a break. I think it's important as well, just before we go for that break, that people look to see beforehand. You know, when you need an emergency room, you need an emergency room. It's often after hours.
Absolutely.
Yes, I do agree with you. Sometimes it's I need a doctor and oh dear, I didn't go today, so I'll go after hours and they have to let me in. And I know also people use emergency rooms, especially like in psychiatry, where it gets you to the front of the queue.
Yeah, that's a very clever way of doing it.
It gets you admitted. But let's go for a break and then we will come back and talk more.
How do you know the life or personal coach you're about to work with is who they say they are? How do you know if they can do the job? At the Africa Board for Coaching, Consulting and Coaching Psychology, we can tell you. So, before you share your secrets and spend your money, check with us first. Visit www.abccccp.com or call us on 012-751-7608. The ABCCP, the professional body for coaches.
Welcome back. You are listening to Healthcare Hour with Colleen Qvist. My guest today is Louis Buckle. He has got 35 years of experience in insurance and also medical schemes and medical industries. And it was during lockdown that him and his neighbor, as he said, had nothing to do. So they decided to help a friend of theirs or a colleague because the person had 500,000 rands worth of unpaid medical claim. And from there, a company was born. So tell us, for people, we can actually mention what is the company's name?
Yeah, so the company's called Claims Hound, and it literally does exactly what the name says. We take the claim and we hound the money that's outstanding from whichever party needs to pay it.
Yes.
So that's literally what we do. And then earlier you asked about areas that we specialize in. So one of the big items we have that often people don't claim simply because they don't know. And unfortunately, people don't read their policy documents.
It's got too much little print in it.
Absolutely. Page 18 is important, but I get tired of page 2. So one of the ones we have is gap cover specifically. Gap cover is very interesting in that if the medical scheme does not pay for the line item, the gap cover is not activated. So in other words, if you go for a heart valve replacement, and this is an actual example we have. So the heart valve replacement gets approved for 450,000 rand for the actual specific item. The scheme goes, yes, but we have a limit on that, we'll pay 350,000. And then the gap cover guys get contacted before and say, no, we'll pick up the difference, no problem. When the actual claim goes through, if the medical scheme processes it and says, claim received 450,000 rand, benefit amount 350,000 rand, the gap cover will cover the 100,000 rand almost automatically. Because the claim was for 450, the scheme limited it to 350 that paid. If, however, and a couple of schemes do it like this, they split the claim because their system isn't programmed properly. So they split the claim and they say, claim received 350,000 rand, amount paid 350,000 rand. Claim received 100,000 rand, amount paid 0. And then the reason code goes, no benefit available. The gap cover will not pay it because there is no gap. There was no benefit.
Yes.
So we've dealt with quite a few of that. Unfortunately, one of the schemes that has this program area is one of our bigger schemes. And simply because they're bigger, we get more of these claims. So we find with them, they've been very cooperative. So if we now send that through and we go, this has happened, they know what's happened, and it gets resolved very quickly. So they're then prepared to provide documentation explaining the rule. But without that, unfortunately, you're not going to get your money. Now, 100,000 rand's a lot, so people do that. The people who lose out are the ones with small gaps because they can't be bothered to send it in. So the guy's got a gap of 3,000 rand, he just doesn't submit it because it doesn't occur to him that there's an error on his medical scheme claim statement. So we deal with a lot of that. The other one that gets missed, which we publish these items on Facebook so that people are aware, is first-time cancer diagnosis. If the patient submit the claim, we would afford the gap. It's normally a gap cover product. If you submit your claim for your cancer treatment, we would have thought that their system would automatically pick up that it's a first diagnosis. It doesn't, unless you ask them and submit the claim for the first time benefit, they forget. And once it's out of the submission period, you then have the argument that we're not paying it, claim submitted too late, it's stale. This happens often. We've dealt with a lot of cancer patients. They're not aware that this little item is over and above the gap cover. And it's normally not a huge amount. It's 50,000 Rand is the norm, sometimes 50. But they're not aware that they can claim it. And what we do in that case, if it's stale, sadly, we go off to the broker because he should have told him once he submitted his claim. But they don't think they can claim for this. So that's first a big one. The other one that's a big one is also on gap cover, co-payments on endoscopic procedures.
Oh, a favorite of mine. Yes.
So, yeah. So what they do, so we've had a couple of cases where it's in the waiting period. They normally have a specific waiting period for endoscopic procedures on your gap cover. So they don't pay the claim. But what they don't pay is they don't pay any of the endocrinologist's claim. Not only the actual scope.
Yes.
So they reject the entire 15,000 Rand claim, of which the scope is probably about 8,000 Rand.
Mm.
And most people go, in waiting period, end of story, done, they did it right. They didn't do it right. All the other things qualify for payment. It's just the scope that does. And they're not even aware of it. So we often pick that up when we analyze something else. So that's the other thing that
I
we
think
do.
also a big shock as well is that scopes are paid differently whether you're in hospital or you're out of hospital, because they often see scopes as being diagnostic, and therefore you went diagnosed before you get to hospital. But often you're in hospital when they go, oh, what's wrong with this patient? Let's find out. Let's send you for a scope. And then they arrive with the credit card machine.
I think you've specified exactly what happens on these scopes, but you've also raised a very interesting other point by default. People are under the impression that if it's done in hospital, if you're on a hospital plan, that it's most likely a PMB. Now, what's very fascinating is there's no requirement in law that a PMB has to be in hospital.
Yeah.
So whether
just
that doctor,
explaining that a PMB is a prescribed minimum benefit. It's not it's not the abbreviation for Pietermaritzburg.
No. So often we get claims of, hey, they won't pay for the scope because it's not done in hospital. And then we go, no, doesn't matter where they do the scope. If it's for a PMB condition, the doctor can do the scope anyway. It's qualified as a PMB.
Mm.
But when the patient submit the claim to some medical schemes, on their little form it says, hospital plan only, no benefits, which of course is nonsense, but the patient doesn't know any better. So we also publish stuff that say, a PMB can happen anywhere. The nursing staff member can treat you on the pavement. It does not have to be in hospital.
Yes.
Yeah. So doctors miss out on this one. And it also starts with first diagnosis. So a lot of doctors miss out at the diagnostic stage. So they consult the patient, they do the treatment, they send the patient for tests, then it comes back from the pathology that the patient is in fact a diabetic. The doctor's consultation qualifies as a PMB because it was for that.
Yes.
If it comes back and he's not, then it doesn't qualify, except for COVID. COVID's fascinating. Doesn't matter whether you're positive or negative, it's still a PMB, as long as the doctor requested the test. So those are little things. And then the other one that we find fascinating, they'll approve your procedure for your, let's talk about eyes. They approve your procedure for your ophthalmology in hospital. Part of their own protocol is that it has 2 follow-up consultations. The doctor has to know whether this worked. That's part of the PMB package. Unless you apply separately for an out-of-hospital PMB, they don't pay for it at some schemes, even though it's part of their own protocol. And because the person has a savings account, it's paid out of a savings account, don't have a clue that it actually should have been part of the actual protocol. During COVID, we had a 98-year-old lady who they expected to take this form to the doctor to fill in.
Yes.
And it was a fascinating case.
Yeah.
Unfortunately for them, this is a very astute elderly lady. My father always used to say, I'm just old, not stupid.
Yes. I may be
Yeah, so
98, but hello, I still have all my faculties.
absolutely. So we encourage people to read your medical scheme statement, and if there's anything paid out of your medical savings account, query it.
Yeah.
That's our main advice. So, and it is really simple, and maybe it's an age thing. Do not phone your medical scheme. You must never phone your medical scheme. Email is fantastic. You've got a perfect record of what you've done.
Yeah.
We also find that if you submit it by email, you get a much higher level staff member dealing with it. It's not
Okay,
some
so that's
random
interesting.
person.
So email versus phone. Yeah, I think it is an age thing. My dad always says, I'll phone them. But then he
Yeah,
also thinks he should phone Take-A-Lot and he should phone like whatever. And I'm saying, Dad, you don't phone those companies. No, I'll just phone. Yeah. So
yeah. So that's
yes, but I'll just phone them. And
yeah,
I don't think older people realize, or even younger people, people don't realize just how huge these companies are. And that, also phoning and being held up and all those kind of things. But you
yeah,
really, after the break, we'll also talk about, what goes through your mind. And, as you said, you're sick, you suddenly get this funny claim, you get all these funny stories, and you like, I don't have the energy to go sort it out. But let's go for the break first, get some energy, and then we will talk more.
The Africa Center for Work-Based Learning is a professional development center for professionals who aim to improve their professional standing. This means that the learning programs we run are more than just academic programs. They are work-based programs that focus on leveraging your current experience as a professional to build your overall profile. A year down the line, the Africa Center for Work-Based Learning is developing into a preferred center for professional development in Pretoria, with 8 professional development faculties including accounting, teaching, entrepreneurship, as well as IT and many more. For more information, go to acwbl.org or dial +27 12 751 7608. The Africa Center for Work-Based Learning, where work is learning.
Welcome back. You're listening to Healthcare Hour with Colleen Qvist. My guest today is Louis Buckle, and he comes from a company called Claims Hound. And that's exactly what they do. They hound people to make sure that claims are paid. It's not a witch hunt. It's just making sure. And in my very first interview with the CEO of a very big medical scheme, he told me that they process thousands and thousands and thousands of claims every day. And so when you look at even a small percentage having a problem, it's a big number. And so often on social media, we only see, oh, look at the problems I'm having. This is terrible. But mistakes are made. We're all people. Yes, I know there are a lot of computers and AI along the way too, but it is about not leaving things. What I was saying though, Louis, is that, sometimes you are sick, okay, and then you suddenly get all these, like not being paid, not being whatever. Money is anxiety inducing as it is. But now you've got paperwork and rules and the books and all these kind of things. And for many people, it's just too much. They don't even know where to start. They stop breathing and they just go, I can't do it.
yeah. You're actually spot on that. So the specific category of patient that comes to mind are the cancer patients. So we have a number of patients. We've got a very interesting one. Both the people are senior advocates in South Africa, and we handle their claims for them. And the reason for this is they can't cope with it.
Mm.
The one person's really, really sick. And so from scratch, we've been running this because they actually contacted us at the time of diagnosis. And it's interesting because their medical bills, the medical schemes already paid in excess of 2 million rand for the treatment. And it's really frightening that if you see, I think there's something like 18, maybe more doctors involved over this period. how do you deal with that as a sane chartered accountant, never mind a
Yes.
person who's ill? So we find that. So on that, we always say to the patient, resist paying the doctor. And it sounds terrible, but the moment you pay the doctor, unfortunately, the doctor's busy and the cooperation goes out the window. And without that little motivation letter,
Yeah.
you're not going to get it paid. So I mean, that to me is also, and they often don't, South Africans, I find we're not assertive enough, whether we're the patient, and we also have the stigma about money, which I don't understand, but I will say to a person, I either don't have the money to pay you, or I don't think I'm going to pay you because I don't think it's fair. But
Mm.
apparently most people don't do that.
No, it's an embarrassment to like not pay it. And I think a lot
Yeah,
of people are embarrassed to say, okay, well, you want to chop off my ear. How much will that cost?
yeah, exactly. But the doctor's equally embarrassed.
Yes.
The
And
doctor
you'll
won't
see
say to the
like,
patient, yeah,
yeah, even in veterinary practices, it says, please don't ask.
yeah. Well, so fortuitously for us as consumers now, the Consumer Protection Act applies to the medical profession.
Okay, sorry for them.
So,
Yes.
so if he doesn't tell you what it's going to cost, you don't have to pay him. And even worse, he can't ask you to pay because he didn't tell you.
Mm.
So we've dealt with a couple of it. So one of the big frightening things, I'm glad you raised this, is anesthetists. Because the patient doesn't see the anesthetist most of the time until minutes before the procedure. And it's fine if you go for a procedure. Let's take an example that we had, sort of with an ankle procedure. So the anesthetist quoted very nicely, so did the orthopedic surgeon. So the patient knew exactly what they were in for.
Mm.
Then something went wrong during the operation. And because the anesthetist bill is billed by the minute, something that would have cost 12,000 Rand went over 100,000 Rand. This patient was in theatre for 11 odd hours. Neither the doctor nor the patient thought this would ever happen. Now the patient sits with a bill of like 98,000 Rand. So I think it's important to understand that beforehand. Fortuitously, this specific anesthetist was quite happy to write the amount off, which was actually very nice of him. The other reality is we don't think he could have claimed the amount anyway, but they don't know that. So cancer patients we find frightening on medical schemes and what they do. This is actually one where we do have a couple of cases for counsel for medical schemes. So we also do that for people. When it's a big case, we will go to the council. We have a couple of cases right at the appeal level at the moment. Medical schemes create the impression often that they can limit your prescribed minimum benefits in the case of cancer. You'll read a rule like, we'll pay it up to 400,000 Rand, thereafter we'll only pay 80%. They cannot actually do that in case of a PMB.
Okay.
And a couple of the large ones have tried to do that, and they've lost the cases. We haven't lost a single case at council yet about cancer treatment. But it's interesting, as a frightened person, and little things that people don't understand is, and they contact us too late. So wealthy people, if you go onto a product like Keytruda, which is a biological, it's 82,000 Rand an infusion. You have a cycle of 6. If the scheme says we're not paying for it, it's too expensive, which is normally what they do, and it's like, yeah, there's no alternative there for you paying in terms of certain section of the Health Act. The patient doesn't know that. The patient doesn't have the money, the patient doesn't get treated, and the patient simply dies.
Mm.
That's the long and the short of it. If the patient has the money, which fortunately for us and them, they arrive at our door and we go, oh, no, I've just paid it on my credit card every week, 82,000 Rand, and it's fine, but I want my money back. So I think it's very important to, if you've got any outstanding claims, to contact people like us or speak to your doctor as soon as possible. Some of
You
these
spoke
doctors,
about a stale claim. How long, how long is it before a claim is too old?
yeah, that's also a very interesting question because that depends. So a stale claim in terms of the Medical Schemes Act is at the end of the month following the 4th month of the treatment. So a lot of guys
End
will
of
go
the
4
month
months, but
following the
actually,
4th month.
yeah.
Okay.
So technically, it's about 5 months.
Okay.
And then there's another little caption in it. So if you're a psychiatric patient on your own, it says unless there's proper cause for it to be extended.
Oh,
So
okay.
people leave that. But if you're in a cancer case or in a car accident, you could very reasonably argue that actually, no, I couldn't have submitted this timelessly.
Mm.
And in which case, we've never had a medical scheme that had a problem with that. The moment you
Yeah.
put a proper motivation, no, you know what, actually, it's fair. In
Because,
the
I mean, when I
insurance
think of
industry,
it, I've had an argument with the hospital who was emailing my dad, but he was the patient in their hospital. I
yeah, how
said,
does that work?
an elderly
Yeah.
patient is not going to be lying in your hospital bed reading his emails.
Well, something that we've experienced recently at one of our top in Cape Town private hospitals, exactly your point. But they use the patient's cell phone as the reference point. So you go like, that's
Yeah.
fantastic. The patient's not conscious. What now?
Yeah.
And I don't get that, but that's unfortunately what happens to the patient. The other thing that we also find interesting, it's critically important that the patient carries their medical scheme card on them. If you do not have that, they actually cannot treat you, and you will be taken to an substandard facility simply because they can't identify your benefits.
Mm.
And I know they shouldn't do that, but it's unfortunately the reality. Because the hospital can't risk having a patient, they can stabilize the patient, they're very good at that. But you cannot have a patient in that's going to cost 10 million rand that you cannot move from the hospital.
Mm.
And people don't realize that little card is actually critically important in your pocket or on you. I mean, we have cases like that where the hospitals contact us and they go like, what? And we go like, no, nothing. You actually stuck. You're not going to get the money. And I
Yeah,
think
and
for
that's
us,
what
that is
happens though, is that hospitals now are almost from a money point of view obliged to turn down the patient before the patient even gets there. So they say no to the ambulance.
yeah, we see that's part of the reason we believe that the ER units are registered separately. So it splits the legal liability one step away from the hospital.
It wasn't us, it was them.
Yeah,
They
and
said
plus,
no.
it's normally a GP practice.
Yes.
You don't sue people who don't have money to pay you. If it was the hospital, the lawyers would have a field job if they don't
Yeah.
admit the patient. You don't sue the poor doctor who can't afford to pay that kind of
Yes.
bill. So that's very strategic. It's the same reason in hospitals, your dispensary is also separate to the hospital. It's not part of the hospital. So it creates that extra distance if there's a dispute on your bill. So we deal with a couple of those, and I must admit, yeah, this one I'm going to also mention. Netcare is particularly good at sorting out a problem when it happens in their dispensary. So like if an item left the dispensary that wasn't quoted, they actually deal with the company supplying it. And people don't think
Yeah.
about that either. That's another little sort of that smarty box you get when you leave the hospital. All the tablets.
Yes.
Your scheme is not necessarily going to pay for that.
No.
And
Yeah.
you can say you don't want it and get it from a pharmacy next door. So we've had that. So again, we've had the patients check your bill, but I think for us the biggest thing is if you read your insurance policy, I mean, I'm going to give it. You don't only do medical. You travel a lot, I'm assuming.
Yes.
A little clause you might want to consider looking at, which I only recently looked at. You are only covered by most travel insurance policies for flight delay if your actual flight booking, the linking flight, is more than 3 hours after the one landing. People don't
Oh,
know that. The flight delay only applies for that. So, in how many cases have you been at the airport for less than 3 hours as a linking flight? And you're not actually covered.
yeah.
The
But
other
we don't know
fascinating
that.
one,
Yes.
the other fascinating one we
So
find is,
all the little
well,
loopholes
I'm
in the
sure
story.
yeah, but you have to read. So, and you can claim this stuff. So, the other one that we find fascinating is, I don't know, when you fly, whether you buy new clothes every time and keep the receipts. Within one of the insurance policies, they actually stipulate they will only refund items for which you have receipts.
Oh, my hat. Who keeps that?
No, exactly. So these are like little things. So those we call the nonsense factors.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I think the big thing is hospital confirmations by email. We find that if you don't do it by email, you are stuck because he said, she says.
Yeah.
Yeah, so just on average, we find the other one also, which people don't realize, they think they must negotiate with the anesthetist. They mustn't. The doctor cannot do the procedure without the anesthetist. They must ask the doctor. Then it's a
Yes.
very simple transaction. He goes, the patient's medical aid will only pay scheme tariffs. He will look for an anesthetist who will charge that. Otherwise, he does not get to do the procedure.
Yeah.
But patients don't think of that. So it's quite a. The other one that we find a huge problem. I don't know if you've got somebody who can access your information on your medical scheme on your behalf, if you already authorize such a person.
Yes. So yes, I do have that.
Yeah, so 99% of people don't have that. And we find when you're unconscious, it's very difficult to get anything from your medical scheme. And if you don't do that, you have a problem. If it goes into your estate, it's even a bigger problem. So we advise people to do that. And then I'm trying to think.
Okay, so I think that there's so many examples. I think we're going to have to invite you back again for another show. But yeah, just in closing though, Louis, I'm sure that people listening to us are hopping up and down and wanting to tell us about their procedure, their process, their claim that hasn't been paid. How do people contact you and what payment is involved?
Okay, so thank you for that. Our Facebook page is the easiest way to contact us. They can also contact us via our webpage. It's literally claimshound.co.za, claimshound one word. And the payment's very interesting. So it depends on what we do for you. So a lot of the time, we will simply tell you what you can do yourself, and we won't charge you for that. Or we get some really interesting cases. Our famous people are retired elderly women. And when they engage, you find out they were the CEO of some major insurance company. And they
And
are
they got
so
plenty
clued
of
up.
time on their hands now.
Yeah. And they read between the lines. So
Yes.
sometimes we publish something on Facebook, or you can even just post your question on Facebook. Somebody else will probably answer it before we do. And all we go is, yeah, actually, that's cool.
Yeah.
So, but normally what we do is we charge an admin fee of 150 Rand to read your case. And then we charge you 15% of whatever we get back for you. If we don't get anything back for you, there's no charge.
Besides 150.
Besides 150 Rand. That's generally our model. And sometimes we can even get it back from the insurer or the scheme by arguing with them, saying that the only reason our client's having to do this is because you didn't pay what you were supposed to. Some schemes
So
go.
that's good to know.
That's it.
Thank you so much for that. Thank you for joining us as a guest.
No, thank you for the invite and enjoyed talking to you.
Yes. Okay, so you've been listening to Healthcare Hour with Colleen Qvist. Please remember to take action. Don't just sit there and wait for your claims to expire in anything. It's about action. Get up now. Contact Claims Hound. Go find them on Facebook. Go share what your problem is and get help. At 150 Rand for your admin fee and 15% of whatever they get back for you, it would be a silly thing not to actually take this further. So also remember that you're loved, you matter, and you're not alone. And I'll see you next week.
The home of inspiration every day.
Most people give up on themselves easily. You know the human spirit is powerful.
From news,
Countries across the globe have been hit by the COVID-19 virus.
views,
There's a global trend to see an increase in GBV incidences, specifically domestic violence.
sports,
What's he say? It's a really good ball. It's Shabalala.
and music to inspire you every day. This is Vuka Online, your inspiration radio station.